To my family, my husband was the less successful one. They praised my sister's CEO husband and ignored mine. I let them think that. Until last week when my dad turned on the news and saw my husband being interviewed as the man behind a multi-million-dollar deal. My dad has this thing he does at Thanksgiving dinner. He raises his glass, looks around the table like he's about to deliver a TED Talk and toasts to success. Every single year. And every single year that toast was aimed at my sister Brooke's husband, Kevin. Kevin the CEO. Kevin the guy with the corner office. Kevin the guy who drives a car that costs more than most people's houses. And my husband, Elliot? My dad wouldn't even look at him during the toast. Not once. For 6 years. I'm Darcy, by the way. I'm 34, I live outside of Richmond, Virginia. And up until about 9 days ago, my family thought my husband was basically a nobody. A guy who worked in tech. Which, in my parents' minds, meant he was probably fixing printers somewhere. And honestly, I never corrected them. Not once. You're probably wondering why. Trust me, I'm getting there. Let me back up. I met Elliot in 2017 at a coffee shop in Arlington. Super cliché, I know. He spilled iced coffee on my laptop bag, and instead of just apologizing like a normal person, he pulled out a napkin and started drawing a diagram of how the spill happened, like fluid dynamics or something. I thought he was either a genius or completely unhinged. Turns out, kind of both. We started dating 3 months later, and from the very beginning he told me something that stuck with me. He said, I don't need people to know what I'm building. I just need to build it. And I thought that was so incredibly cool. Still do. Now my family? Different philosophy entirely. My mom Judith and my dad Glenn are the kind of people who measure everything by how it looks from the outside. They're not bad people, I want to be clear about that, but appearance is everything. My mom once returned a couch because her neighbor got the same one. I'm serious. She literally said, I can't be seen with the same sectional as Pam. Pam, by the way, is a perfectly nice woman. But that's my mom. Everything's a competition she didn't sign up for but refuses to lose. So when I brought Elliot home for the first time and he showed up in jeans and a hoodie, driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic, I could see the judgment forming in real time. My dad shook his hand and said, and I quote, So what's your 5-year plan, son? We've been dating for 4 months. Elliot just smiled and said, to be happy. My dad looked at him like he'd answered in a foreign language. Meanwhile, Brooke, my older sister, golden child, the one who literally got a bigger cake on my 10th birthday because she had a rough week at school. Brooke had just started dating Kevin. Kevin showed up in a navy blazer, brought my mom flowers, and talked about his trajectory at the firm for 45 minutes straight. My dad was practically glowing. I could have brought home an astronaut that night and it wouldn't have mattered. Do you think that bothered me? Yeah, of course it did. I'm not made of stone. But here's the thing, I knew something about Elliot that my family didn't. And I chose to keep it that way. Because Elliot had started a company. A real one. Not some little side hustle. An actual data analytics startup that was being quietly funded by people whose names you'd recognize if I could say them. But Elliot didn't talk about it. He didn't brag. He just worked. 17-hour days sometimes. And I supported him because I believed in him and also because I'd seen the numbers and those numbers were not small. But to my parents, he was just Darcy's quiet husband who does computer stuff. Brooke once said to me at brunch, with my mother sitting right there, it must be nice not to have the pressure of an ambitious spouse. She said it like she was being sympathetic. Like she was giving me a little pat on the head. My mom nodded. Nodded. Like that was a reasonable thing to say. I just sipped my mimosa and smiled. Because what was I supposed to do? Pull out Elliot's revenue projections? What would you have done? Honestly, tell me in the comments because I've gone back and forth on this 1,000 times. Things really got worse after Brooke and Kevin's wedding. It was this enormous event at a vineyard in Charlottesville. 200 guests, a live jazz band, the whole thing. Beautiful, I'll give them that. But at the reception, my dad gave this speech where he talked about how proud he was that Brooke had chosen so well. He looked right at Kevin and said, You're the son I always wanted. Elliot was sitting right next to me. He squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. That one hurt. After that, every family gathering became the Kevin show. Kevin got promoted. Let's open champagne. Kevin bought a boat. Oh, let's all go see Kevin's boat. Kevin's company had a good quarter. My dad would literally print out the earnings report and put it on the fridge. The fridge. Like Kevin was a second grader who brought home a spelling test. Meanwhile, Elliot quietly closed a Series B funding round, and I couldn't even mention it because he'd asked me not to. He said, when the time is right, they'll see. And I trusted him. Even when it was hard. Even when my mom called me one evening and said, casually like she was discussing the weather, You know, honey, it's not too late to go back to school. You could meet someone more driven. He said that. About my husband. While I was married to him. I almost lost it. Almost. But I just said, Elliot's doing great, Mom, and changed the subject. Because some battles you don't fight with words. You fight with time. So I waited. And Elliot kept building. And my family kept underestimating him. And if you think this is the part where everything changes, you're close. But what happened last week? Nobody in my family saw it coming. Not my dad, not my mom, not Brooke, and definitely not Kevin. I'll tell you exactly how it went down. But first, just know that when I say my jaw dropped, I'm not exaggerating. Because even I, the one person who always believed in Elliot, did not expect what happened next. So last Tuesday changed everything, and I need you to understand the setup because the timing was almost too perfect. Like the universe had been taking notes for 6 years and finally decided to deliver. Elliot had been traveling a lot. Like a lot. 3 cities in 2 weeks. He'd come home exhausted, barely talk about work, just kiss me on the forehead and fall asleep on the couch with his laptop still open. I didn't push him. I never pushed him. Because I knew whatever he was working on was big. I just didn't know how big. He'd say things like, "It's almost there, Darce," and I'd nod and make him another cup of coffee. That was our system. He built things. I kept the lights on emotionally. It worked. Now here's where it gets interesting. My dad, Glenn. Remember the man who toasts to success every Thanksgiving like he invented the concept? He's a massive news junkie. I'm talking CNN on the TV, local news on the iPad, business headlines on his phone, all at the same time. My mom once joked that if Glenn missed a news cycle, he'd file a missing persons report on himself. So it was a completely normal Tuesday evening. My parents were at their house in Fredericksburg. Dad was in his recliner. Mom was in the kitchen making her turkey meatloaf that nobody actually likes but we've all been pretending to enjoy for 20 years. And the TV was on. CNBC specifically. My dad called me at 7:48 p.m. I know the exact time because I looked at my phone and thought, oh no, someone died. Because Glenn does not call at 7:48 p.m. on a Tuesday unless something is very wrong or very weird. I picked up and the first thing he said was, nothing. Dead silence. Then, Darcy. Turn on CNBC. Right now. So I did. And there was Elliot. My Elliot. Sitting in a studio chair looking like a completely different person. I mean, same face obviously, but he was wearing this sharp charcoal suit I'd never seen before and he was calm, confident, talking to the anchor about a deal. A multi-million-dollar acquisition deal. His company, the one my family thought was some computer thing, had just been acquired for a number that I'm not going to say out loud, but let me put it this way. It had a lot of zeros. A lot. The kind of number that makes you sit down even if you're already sitting down. The anchor called him one of the most quietly influential entrepreneurs in the mid-Atlantic tech scene. Quietly influential. If that doesn't sum up Elliot perfectly, nothing does. My dad was still on the phone. And he said, I swear this is word for word. Is that Elliot? Your Elliot? The one who drives the Honda. I said, he upgraded to a Toyota last year, Dad, but yes. That's my husband. Silence. Then, how long have you known about this? And this is the part where I could have been gracious. I could have said, oh, it just happened, we're all surprised. I could have let him off easy. But you know what? After 6 years of watching my father treat Kevin like a king and Elliot like furniture, I said, since the beginning, Dad. Since the very beginning. He didn't say anything for about 10 seconds. 10 very long, very satisfying seconds. Then he hung up. Now do I feel a little guilty about that? A tiny bit. Maybe. But also, no. Not really. Would you? After 6 years. Tell me honestly. Within an hour my phone was a war zone. My mom called 3 times. Brooke texted me a message that just said, why didn't you tell us? All caps, 3 question marks, like I'd been hiding a crime. My Uncle Roy, who I hear from maybe twice a year, suddenly wanted to catch up. And my cousin Tina, who once told me at a barbecue that I settled, sent me a heart emoji. Just a heart. No words. Just red heart. The audacity. But the best part? The absolute best part? Kevin. Brooks Kevin. Mr. 5-year plan. Mr. I'm the son Glenn always wanted. He called Elliot directly. Not me, Elliot. And he asked if they could grab lunch and talk about potential synergies. Synergies. I almost fell off my chair. 6 years of not once asking Elliot about his work, not once showing interest, and now suddenly there are synergies to discuss. Elliot looked at me after he hung up and just said, synergies, stars. And we both laughed so hard I cried. Here's what happened over the next few days, and this is where things got complicated. Because my family didn't just change their attitude, they overcorrected. Massively. It was like someone flipped a switch and suddenly Elliot was the most important person in the family. My dad invited us to dinner. At a steakhouse, not at home, which is Glenn's version of rolling out the red carpet. My mom started calling Elliot sweetheart, which she had never done. Not once in 6 years. She'd called him Darcy's husband, or sometimes just him. Now suddenly it's sweetheart? Come on. And Brooke. My sister, who once told me she felt sorry for my lifestyle, suddenly wanted to go shopping together. Girls' Day, she called it. We hadn't had a girls' day since 2019, and that one ended with her telling me my shoes were brave. Which is Brooke speak for ugly. I wanted to be happy about the attention. Part of me was. But another part of me, the part that remembers every dismissive comment, every eye roll, every time my dad compared Elliot to Kevin, that part was watching very carefully. Because there's a difference between people who are genuinely proud of you and people who suddenly realize you're useful. And I couldn't tell which one my family was. Not yet. Elliot, sweet Elliot, he didn't see it. Or maybe he didn't want to see it. Because the thing about Elliot is that he doesn't hold grudges. He's not wired that way. So when my dad called him son for the first time at that steakhouse dinner, the same word he'd used exclusively for Kevin for 6 years, Elliot just smiled and said, "Thanks, Glenn." Like it was normal. Like it hadn't taken a news appearance and a multi-million-dollar deal to earn a word that should have been free. That killed me a little. I'm not going to lie. After dinner, my dad pulled Elliot aside. I watched from across the restaurant. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw my dad put his hand on Elliot's shoulder and I saw Elliot nod. When we got in the car, I asked what that was about. Elliot said, he asked if I could help Kevin's company with some consulting. Says Kevin's been struggling with a big client. I just stared at him. We've been married for 5 years. He's never once asked about your work. And now he wants you to help Kevin. Elliot shrugged. People change, Darce. And I love that man. I love him more than I can put into words. But in that moment I thought, no. People don't always change. Sometimes they just rearrange. And there's a difference. A big one. What happened after that dinner is when things really started to unravel. Because Elliot, being Elliot, actually said yes. He started helping. Not just Kevin, my whole family. My dad mentioned the house needed a new roof. Elliot offered to cover it. My mom wanted to redo the kitchen. Elliot said he'd take care of it. Brooke and Kevin needed a financial advisor. Elliot connected them with his guy. He was doing everything, to be the family member they'd never let him be. And they were taking it. Every single bit of it. With open hands and closed mouths. And I started to feel something I hadn't expected. I started to feel angry. Not at Elliot. At them. Because they weren't saying thank you. Not really. They were saying, "Oh, Elliot, you're so generous," but then turning around and asking for more. My mom called one Saturday morning and said, "Sweetheart, do you think Elliot could look at something for Uncle Roy's business?" She wasn't calling to check on me. She was placing an order. I tried to talk to Elliot about it. I sat him down one night and said, "Do you see what's happening?" He looked at me with those calm, steady eyes and said, "I see a family that's finally letting me in." And my heart broke. Because he wasn't wrong. But he wasn't right either. They weren't letting him in. They were letting his money in. And I was the only one who could see the difference. Something was about to happen that would prove me right. And honestly, I wish it hadn't. But it did. So about 3 weeks after the CNBC thing, my mom's birthday was coming up. Judith turned 62. And every year it's the same routine. Dinner at her house. Glenn grills something he's convinced is restaurant quality but is always a little too charred. And Brooke brings a cake from that fancy bakery in town. Simple. Predictable. Fine. But this year Brooke calls me and says, "We should do something big for Mom. Like really big. Like a party." And I'm thinking, "Hey, sure, that's sweet." Until she says, "And Elliot should pay for it." She didn't say, "Maybe Elliot could help," or, "Do you think Elliot would want to chip in?" She said he should pay for it. Like it was his job now. Like that was his role in the family, the wallet. I said, "Brooke, that's not really." And she cut me off. "Darcy, come on. He just made millions. Mom deserves something nice. Don't be selfish." Selfish. She called me selfish. The woman who didn't invite me to her birthday brunch in 2021 because there weren't enough seats. She had 14 seats, by the way. I saw the photos. That woman called me selfish for hesitating to volunteer my husband's money for a party she wanted to throw. I didn't say anything. I just said I'd think about it and hung up. And then I sat in my car in the driveway for about 20 minutes just breathing. Do you ever do that? Just sit somewhere and breathe because if you move, you might explode? That was me. But I didn't tell Elliot what Brooke said. Because I knew exactly what he'd do. He'd say yes. He'd say, "Of course, let's throw Judith a great party." Because that's who he is. And normally I love that about him. But this time it felt like watching someone walk into a trap with a smile on their face. So the party happened. And yes, Elliot paid for it. Not because Brooke asked him, because my dad asked him. Glenn called Elliot directly, bypassed me entirely and said, "Son, your mother-in-law would be so touched if you helped us put together something special." He called him son again. That word was doing a lot of heavy lifting lately. Elliot rented out a private room at this beautiful restaurant in downtown Richmond. Catering, flowers, a live acoustic guitars, the whole thing. It must have cost. Honestly, I don't even want to think about the number. And you know what my mom said when she walked in? She looked around, smiled, and said, "Oh, Brooke, did you plan this? It's gorgeous." Brooke. He thanked Brooke, who had done literally nothing except show up 45 minutes late with a store-bought card. Elliot didn't flinch. He just raised his glass and said, "Happy birthday, Judith." Like he didn't care about the credit. And maybe he didn't. But I cared. I cared enough for both of us. During the party, something happened that I almost missed. Almost. I was coming back from the bathroom and I passed this little hallway near the kitchen. And I heard my dad's voice. He was on the phone. And he was saying, No, he's good for it. Trust me. I'll talk to him this week. The guy just closed a deal worth more than. Yeah. No, he won't say no. He never says no. He was talking about Elliot. To someone I still don't know who, probably Uncle Roy or one of his golf buddies. About Elliot like he was an ATM. A resource. Not a person. Not his son-in-law. A source of money that won't say no. I stood in that hallway and I felt something shift inside me. Like a door closing quietly. Not with a slam. Just a click. Done. I went back to the table, sat next to Elliot, and for the rest of the night I smiled and laughed and clinked glasses. But inside I was already making a plan. Because my family wasn't changing. They weren't growing. They weren't suddenly seeing Elliot's value as a person. They were seeing his value as a checkbook. And I refused, absolutely refused, to let the man I love be used like that. The next morning I told Elliot everything. The hallway phone call. What Brooke said about the party. How Mom credited Brooke for the restaurant. How every sweetheart and son coincidentally appeared after CNBC and not a single day before. I laid it all out. Calmly. No yelling. Just facts. And for the first time since I've known him, Elliot didn't have a calm, measured response. He just sat at the kitchen table and stared at his coffee. For a long time. And then he said very quietly, "I thought they finally liked me, Darce." That sentence. That one sentence destroyed me. Because Elliot, this brilliant, generous, extraordinary man, had spent 6 years just wanting my family to like him. Not admire him. Not need him. Just like him. And the one moment he thought they did, it turned out they just liked what he could give them. I held his hand and said, "I like you. I've always liked you. Before the deal, before the company, before any of it. And I need you to hear that right now." He nodded. And then he said something that surprised me. He said, "What do you want to do? Not what should we do? What do I want to do?" Because even in that moment he was putting me first. Even when my family wouldn't. So here's what I did. And I want you to tell me if you think this was right, because honestly I go back and forth. I called a family meeting. Sunday afternoon. My parents' house. I told everyone I had something important to discuss. My mom probably thought I was pregnant. Brooke probably thought I was getting a divorce. My dad probably thought Elliot was about to write another check. We sat in the living room. Me, Elliot, Glenn, Judith, Brooke, and Kevin. And I said very calmly, "Elliot and I are moving. We've been looking at places in Colorado. We found a house outside Boulder. We're leaving in 6 weeks." The silence in that room. You could hear the clock on the wall. You could hear the neighbor's dog 3 houses down. Nobody moved. My mom spoke first. "Colorado? But why? Everything's here. We're here." And I said, and I'm proud of this even though my voice was shaking, "Mom, I love you. I love all of you. But for 6 years you treated my husband like he didn't matter. And then he was on TV and suddenly he mattered so much that you couldn't stop calling. Not to ask how he's doing. Not to say you were wrong. To ask for things. Roofs and kitchens and parties and consulting and favors. And not once, not one single time, did any of you say, 'Elliot, I'm sorry we overlooked you.' Nobody said a word. Brooke looked at the floor. Kevin looked at Brooke. My dad looked at the TV, which wasn't even on, like he was hoping the news would rescue him from this conversation. And then my mom started crying. And she said, "I didn't realize." And I said, "Yes, you did, Mom. You all did. You just didn't think it mattered." We left that afternoon. The drive home was quiet. Elliot held my hand the whole way. And when we pulled into our driveway, he looked at me and said, "Thank you for fighting for us." We moved to Colorado 5 weeks later. Beautiful house. Mountains out every window. Elliot started a new venture. I started a consulting business of my own. And for the first time in our marriage, we didn't have to prove anything to anyone. We just got to be us. Now you're probably wondering, did my family ever come around? Like really come around? Not for money. Not for status. For real? Yeah. They did. It took time. It took my dad showing up unannounced in Boulder 4 months later, standing on our porch in the snow saying, "I was a fool, Darcy. And I owe that man in there an apology that's about 6 years late." And he went inside and he sat with Elliot and he talked. Really talked. For 3 hours. No agenda. No favors. Just a father-in-law finally seeing his daughter's husband. My mom started calling every Sunday. Not to ask for anything. Just to talk. She asked Elliot about his new project once and actually listened. Like asked follow-up questions and everything. Baby steps but real ones. Brooke was the last to come around. She sent me a letter. An actual handwritten letter. About 2 months after we moved. It said a lot of things but the part one keep going back to is this. She wrote that she was jealous. Not of the money. Of me and Elliot. Of what we had. Because while she and Kevin looked perfect on paper, they'd been struggling for a long time. And watching me stand by Elliot all those years when nobody else would, that was the kind of love she wanted but didn't know how to ask for. We're not perfect now. No family is. But last Thanksgiving, our first one back in Virginia since the move, my dad raised his glass. And he didn't toast to success. He said, to family. The real kind. The kind that shows up when there's nothing to gain. And he looked at Elliot. And Elliot looked at me. And I thought, finally you see him. So that's my story. It's messy and it's long and some parts still sting when I think about them. But if you take one thing from it, let it be this. The people who love you when you have nothing are the people who deserve to be there when you have everything. Don't let anyone treat your person like they're invisible. Not your parents. Not your siblings. Not anyone. If you made it this far, thank you. Seriously, thank you for listening. I know it was a lot. If you like this story, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button. It means more than you think. And if something about this hit home for you or if you've been through something similar or even if you think I was completely wrong about something, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. I want to hear your story too. And if you're out there right now standing by someone the way I stood by Elliot, when nobody else sees their value, keep going. It's worth it. I promise you it is so worth it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and take care of your people.